Hello, I'm American Social Democracy. I'm here today to do what I like to do, and that is to provide social democratic commentary to my viewers. Basically, to preach to the choir on one hand, and on the other hand, anybody who's skeptical of my views decided to come to this channel. Hopefully, minds will be changed for the better through the power of persuasion. And be sure to hit that like button and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you kept up to date with hard hitting social democratic commentary. But yours truly, I am American Social Democracy. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the issue of equality when it comes to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community in America and overall in the West. There's been in really drastic positive improvements made. I mean, when I was growing up in the 1980s, the just to say in the 1980s and early 1990s that you were sympathetic to equality toward the LGBTQ community, and you sort of had a live and let live attitude, and you might have even been indifferent. And if that discussion came along, even if you other indifference, they would be mad at you. Critic would be like, "What do you mean you don't care?" And I'll give you an example. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When I was in college in the early 1990s, and the subject came up uh, about whether gay people ought to have equal rights, or what do you think should be done with them? And back then, just like many who had a tolerant, affirming attitude, it was just kind of like, I don't care. I'm okay with what they do as long as they're happy is what counts. And usually, a critic will be like, "What's your problem? You some kind of weird liberal?" That would be that was to say, I don't care, live, let live was a liberal radical position back then. And that's not an exaggeration. It's the damn truth. So you went from that to the fact that, hey, they're prominently on television now. They're prominently. You got people who are elected to political office. You got the community where they have the right for marital equality, the right for basically the same rights essentially as the straight population for the most parts. There are certain sections of the country where there's still problems that needs to be resolved. But when you compare that to a generation ago, it's been a lot of advances made. And I'm not saying that, hey, the equality's been achieved, but I'm going to say that there's been successes. I mean, you want to make an argument that you know um, African Americans who were put into slavery here in the United States, and then once the shackles of slavery was over, you had Jim Crow, unfortunately, lurking his ugly head for over a century. And while there is, the Civil Rights Act basically brought about some basic tenets of equality, there is still a lot of things that needs to be done to correct racial injustices that was placed upon the African American population. And Tim Black um, talks about what he talks about raising black issues, and some people would be like, "Oh no, there they go talking about race again." No, Tim Black's got a point. And he's not sitting there trying to tell you should hate yourself if you're white, and you're the devil if you're white. I don't get that from him. What I'm getting is, you know, um, and he's not even talking about equality of outcome. He's talking about an equal playing field. You know, the hard economics when it comes to equity and considering the wealth gap between white America and Black America, Tim Black is absolutely correct in that regard. Or you can compare it with Jewish Americans. They were not allowed to run for political office when this country was founded. Same with Roman Catholics, except in Rhode Island. Rhode Island was the only state when this America was founded where Jews and Catholics could run for a public office. Now we will all think it's crazy that a Catholic or a Jewish person cannot run for a political office, but there are states like South Carolina, which is still on the law books, where atheists are not allowed to run for office. But some sectors of the Christian community in this country think they're the biggest victims of them all. And as I said, I think that atheists are probably the most discriminated religious group in this country today. Yeah, try getting elected to office saying you're an atheist. It's next to impossible, and you got too many people professing whatever religion they are. Be it Christianity, be it Judaism, even Islam. For those who are running for office, but anyway, my point is, it all pertains back to the issue of equality when it comes to the LGBTQ community. Now, um, there are problems around the world that still persist when it comes to the LGBTQ community. In Uganda, I'm not sure if it became law, but there was a bill in the Uganda parliament a decade ago that called for the execution of people who are homosexual. In Saudi Arabia and Iran, um, you get the death penalty for simply being homosexual. In Afghanistan, I'm assuming that might be the case now with the Taliban in charge. Eh, and so, not all is well with when it comes to the issue of equality with the LGBTQ community. Now, it sounds like I'm getting all propped up about identity politics right now, but I will tell people that there is a big difference for those who are critical, social conservatives who are critical of what they consider the radical gay agenda, which the radical gay agenda really means the fact that they achieve some semblance of equality. Um, you know, uh, uh, I'm nobody is asking for those who are old fashioned about their views to sit there and throw parade for people in the LGBTQ community. All they're asking for is basic equality. And the way I sum it up is equality is not a special right. Now, Russia is a whole different kettle of fish. I mean, it's not to the level of Saudi Arabia or Iran or Afghanistan or Uganda, but they are certainly not the United States. They're certainly not Canada. They're certainly not any of the countries in Western Europe, or even countries in the developing world. That are on par with the West as far as being a civil society is concerned. Um, Russia is still living in a kind of a darker time period. Um, and anyway, historically, when the Russian Revolution took place, Lenin actually decriminalized, or he legalized homosexuality, which was very forward thinking at that time. Not a Lenin supporter, but on that one, he was correct to do. Stalin literally criminalized homosexuality when he became the premier. And I'm thinking that Russia is still, in spite of the positive reforms of Gorbachev and everything, and Russia's always kind of remained behind the rest of the West on this issue, and probably a little worse now with Vladimir Putin as the president of Russia. But the video's a little long, but please watch it because it's relevant. It is very relevant. So give me a couple of moments here, and we will start shortly. Okay, let's see. Let me get everything set in place. Hold on. Hold tight. Hold tight. Okay, and lights, camera, action, as they say. Here we go.
Скажите, пожалуйста, как вы относитесь к ЛГБТ? Нейтрально. Почему нейтрально? Ну, то есть, выбор каждого, то есть, я гетеросексуал, но если, допустим, я знаю, что мой друг гомосексуалист там, или пансексуал, то мне вообще без разницы. Да.
Мне без разницы.
Тоже безразлично вообще.
Ну, я выбрала.
Прошу, подряд.
Я к этому никак не отношусь.
Никак не относишься?
Да.
Отрицательно, резко, негативно, ненавижу, вообще никак не поддерживаю, просто, скажем так. Потому что это ненормально. Особенно у нас вот в Щите это точно не принято никак тут сразу.
Нейтрально? Почему так?
Ну, как бы, у меня нету такого предрассудка. Меня никто не обижал, не домогался, ничего такого не было. Даже, по-моему, в детстве был такой, странный парень у него. Он считал себя пытался выглядеть, одеваться как девочка, не хотел быть парнем. Поэтому как-то воспитан к этому, что ли. Я это уже видел. Да и, в принципе, для меня куда больше опасения вызывают какие-то убийцы, маньяки. Они же меня никак не тронули.
Меня не волнует личная жизнь других людей. Это личное дело каждого. Поэтому, если это не делает больно другим, то меня это тоже никак не касается. Спокойно.
Ну да, равнодушно.
Нейтрально, толерантно.
Почему так?
Ну, потому что у каждого человека есть право любить, и какая разница, какого пола человек. Пусть любит девочку, если девочка этого хочет.
Это же тоже люди. И как-то меня не сильно волнует, кого они любят, кого не любят.
Больше в положительную, нейтральную сторону, то есть не считаю это чем-то отрицательным.
Ну, я и положительно, и отрицательно.
Какие положительные черты?
А положительные, наверное, к девушкам больше относятся. То есть, как бы, то, что лесбиянство, то есть, а к парням как бы не приемлю это. Понимаете? То есть мужчины, женщины, девушки, они такие сентиментальные люди, как бы в том плане, то, что они умеют любить и так далее. То есть они. А парни в парнях, как-то я не знаю, что можно в парне прекрасно найти.
Ну, как бы по мне так это неправильно, но если так посмотреть, меня это не касается, я этого сам не вижу. Если они это все вытворяют где-то за стенами, может, не на людях, то это как-то пусть в тюрьме. Ну нет, почему в тюрьме? Допустим, просто они не афишируют, если это. Почему бы и нет?
Как считаете, сколько таких людей в России?
Много. Очень много. Много, наверное.
Мне кажется, многое, но все скрывают. 30%, может быть.
30%.
Ну да, кажется.
40%.
То есть почти каждый второй.
Почти каждый второй, да. Я думаю, их много. Просто статистика об этом, конечно же, умалчивает, и большинство людей просто запуганы.
Треть, может быть. Потому что, даже среди моих знакомых, наверное, треть, особенно среди девушек, точно являются бисексуалками. А среди парней, по-моему, 3 знакомых бисексуалов.
Ну вот, мне недавно один такой написал познакомиться, я ему сначала подыграл, и говорю, пригласил в зал его, под этот. Он слился, я ему говорю, потом не сдержался, да, я говорю, раз, сразу удалил страницу, все. Я, если честно, хотят они там ебаться в жопу, это их дело. Но, когда они вот так выставляют себя на показ и пытаются что-то друг другу пропихнуть, это нормально, все такое, это я не поддерживаю.
Как считаете, что влияет на ориентацию?
Не знаю, я думаю, воспитание. Просто, у меня такое пришлось, что я сам себя воспитываю. Для меня приемлемо больше, женская любовь ко мне, чем мужская ко мне. Я могу назвать своего друга братом, но это уже братская такая любовь, но ни в коем случае до постели это не доходит. То есть, и неприемлемо это, и в голове не может уложиться.
Окружение, скорее всего. Я так больше думаю, что все-таки человек вырос в таком окружении, где всегда это будет презирать, он и сам, скорее всего, это будет презирать. Ну, а если вырос в нормальном обществе, где такого не было, то сам не будет. Чего?
Наверное, именно выбор человека. Если как его воспитали, его, наверное, может быть, если его выбор какой. Больные.
Больные?
Да.
Вы считаете, это нарушение?
Да, это нарушение психики какой-то.
Также некоторые факторы, как с психологией связаны. Допустим, если у человека была травма какая-нибудь в детстве.
Как-то среда влияет.
Да, среда, скорее всего.
Бывает, как считаете, рожденный муж?
Врожденным вряд ли.
Ну, это болезнь какая-то, явно что-то с головой. Ну, может, отца не было, может, изнасиловали в детстве, что-нибудь такое.
Как думаете, что с ними вообще надо делать? Их отличить или как-то что?
Жечь. Жечь. Да.
Допустим, родился гетеросексуал, и он не может, допустим, сам поменяться до гомосексуалиста, кстати. То есть он родился, допустим, и таким продолжает быть.
Многие люди высказывают опасения, что как-то пропаганда может повлиять.
Нет, я считаю, что это вообще невозможно. То есть в интернете кто-то там показывает, что, допустим, я гомосексуалист, мне кажется, ни один ребенок после этого не станет гомосексуалистом.
Но если ваш ребенок сделает камин-аут, скажет, вот, папа, я нетрадиционная ориентация, как вы поступите?
Спокойно мне как бы. То есть это выбор каждого человека.
Для вас не проблема.
Да, то есть у меня есть ребенок, и, ну, в принципе, уже как бы эти вопросы поднимались, и я буду любить его точно так же. Я абсолютно буду не против. В нашей стране, конечно, будут определенные проблемы с этим, но в целом никак.
Возьму ремень и поставлю.
Я не могу ответить на этот вопрос.
Представьте такую ситуацию, ваш сын к вам подходит, говорит, папа, я гей. Ваша реакция?
Детдом.
Откажусь, наверное, не знаю.
Я надеюсь, что я с таким не
Okay. Got a little commercial, these little block up ads. And so I'm not going to continue. I'm going to come back to my channel here because I don't particularly like the block on, the little ads over there. I'm not going to go and expose you to that, but you get the idea. Um, and there are legitimate criticisms of Russia, and there are criticisms of Russia which are not legit. The criticism of Russia currently is that Vladimir Putin is a right wing authoritarian asshole. Obviously, he is. I mean, the Russian Orthodox Church is basically the state church of Russia, and they don't like the competition, and so Mormons, Jehovah Witnesses, Baptists, other non-traditional Christian groupings, and evangelical Protestant types are not tolerated in Russia, and I certainly don't agree with those theologies. I mean, I'm a Christian, but I don't agree with those theologies. But I think that persecuting religious minorities is just awful. And shame on the Russian Orthodox Church for doing this. And that's my problem with Vladimir Putin. He and the Russian Orthodox Church are engaging in this pointless persecutions. But also, the persecution against the LGBTQ community is also just as horrendous and as wrong. And it's just, we saw in the video itself, the attitudes of these folks is reminiscent of what I used to hear 30, 35, 40 years ago. And just kind of like, I mean, maybe the way to look at it is eventually, I mean, nothing is forever. I mean, the Berlin Wall eventually came down in 1989, for example. The Eastern Bloc crumbled. Russia eventually, the Soviet Union ceased to be officially in 1991. So, Eastern Europe went through, most of the Eastern European countries kind of went toward Western democracies, but there are some countries in Eastern Europe, Russia being included, that while they're no longer communists, have kind of taken a hard authoritarian right turn. I wouldn't say it's hard right as fascism of Mussolini or Hitler, but they certainly stretched the envelope in that regard. And their attitudes toward the LGBT community would be such an example. Now, as I said, the legitimate criticisms of Russia is discrimination against religious minorities, discrimination against the LGBTQ community, being kind of favoring social repression against the people. That would be my criticism of Russia. My criticism of Russia is not, oh my, they were in bed with Donald Trump and got Donald Trump elected. That, the Hillary Clinton hysteria that took place following the 2016 election, where they started to sound like Bush Cheney era neocons on foreign policy, wanting to just go and pick a fight in the same way that people from the Republican Party today wants to pick a fight with Iran. And that is just, which is weird when you think about it. When you have Republican right wingers wanting to start a fight with Iran, and you have Democrats wanting to revive the Cold War against Russia, and both Democrats and Republicans alike on Capitol Hill are okay with selling arms to Saudi Arabia, which, in my opinion, is a bigger threat to the West than Iran or Saudi Arabia. I mean, Russia. Sorry, Russia. The fact that they are a bigger threat. And no, United States politicians from both parties, they sell arms to Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia spread jihad and terrorism against the West. But, the United States are like, oh, not a problem. There's nothing to see here. Iran, which does next to nothing in terms of terrorism, oh, we got to go push sanctions on them and make life really shitty on them. But at the same time, with Russia, again, Russia and Iran are actually allies with each other. You get what I'm saying? And as far as Donald Trump, saying that Donald Trump is tied with Iran, excuse me, with Russia, you know why that's bullshit? They said that about Bernie Sanders. They said that about Jill Stein. They said that about Tulsi Gabbard. And I do not believe that Tulsi Gabbard, Jill Stein, Bernie Sanders, or Donald Trump are all politically in bed with Vladimir Putin. So, I mean, that's ridiculous. And the thing about Russia and Iran, where both parties got it really ass backwards, Iran and Russia are allies, and their ISIS had their asses kicked, not by the United States, but by Russia and Iran and Syria, who are the ones against the radical crazies that exist in the Middle East. A little caveat that people are not aware of, because a lot of people think, well, you have silly, brainless liberals that are thinking, you know, well, don't blame Muslims as a religion of peace. You hear that on one side. They don't get the whole picture. But on the other side, you hear a lot of right-wing Republicans thinking, they're all out there to get us. They're all out there to get us. And honestly, there is actually a nuance. And, most Muslims are like most Christians. They are hypocrites in a good way, and they don't live strictly by religious law, and they go on with their day-to-day life. And then you got some crazies within Christianity. You have some crazies within Islam, and for those who are crazy, hell with them. Whichever branch of theology that they are at. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that even with Islam, you got Al Qaeda hates Iran, the Taliban. I don't know where Taliban stands on Iran, but Al Qaeda hates Syria. And you have Hamas and Hezbollah. They hate each other, and all these people who are talking about a caliphate against the West, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about because Islam has so many branches that despise each other, that nothing cohesive can happen. In that regard, there are like the many facets of Leninism that, not all Leninists think the same. I mean, Stalinists and Trotskyites have actual generations of hostility toward each other. Maoism, they'll tell you that Stalinism was bland and Trotskyism is counter-revolutionary, blah, blah, blah. And basically, they don't all think alike either. So my point is that with this whole thing about Russia, there are legitimate criticisms and there are legitimate uh, things not to criticize them on. One thing I won't criticize Russia on is they managed to do the one thing right when communism disappeared in 1991, and that was to keep their universal healthcare system. And same thing with the Eastern European countries. They kept their universal healthcare systems um, because they knew what a nightmare it would be to follow the American criminal style healthcare system. Yeah, communism in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe were repress a lot of human rights. But you know what? Capitalism in especially the United States form of capitalism represses human rights too. But then again, I've always been a third camp internationalist. And if you don't know what the third camp is, I suggest you look it up one of these days. One of the few things that Trotsky came up with that I agree with, and I'm kind of critical of Trotskyism, but that was the one thing he came up with that, he and some of his supporters came up with that I would agree with. But anyway, I digress long enough. Thing about it is that right now the plight of LGBTQ equality in Russia is now where the United States was, I would essentially say, a generation ago. Hopefully, better things and more improvements and human rights will win and they will achieve equality too. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we're the muckrakers of our time. Feel free to share the content on this channel. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you keep up to date by hard hitting commentary by yours truly. I am American Social Democracy, Peace, Class Struggle Now, and Equality, absolute equality for those in the LGBTQ community.